at the end of the day, I really feel like this is the most dangerous aspect about him. While I also think there's something positive in how he talks about it. It just speaks to the complexity of this dude. We talked about how he defends the status quo, and part of that is rooted in just how much time he spends studying old storytelling, particularly in the Western tradition, and like how that informs everything about how he sees the world and which Disney movies he likes and which Disney movies he thinks are evil.
So yeah, the Disney movies, Beauty and the Beast, nailed it. Little Mermaid, dead on. Sleeping Beauty, dead on. The Lion King, I've done a lot of analysis of. It's a little more on the edge because some of the archetypal themes in it were put in consciously, and so they're more propagandistic in some sense.
So it wasn't pure storytelling.
That's right.
In your
there was
argument.
a goal, and a story is something that you can't contrive it. It has to manifest itself in some sense. If you're aiming it at a moral statement, then it's not art, it's propaganda. And it'll fall flat. Frozen was a good example. That was propagandistic right from the end to the beginning as far as I was concerned.
But the one major way is that he kind of defends the status quo is through one of his rules in his 12 rules to life, and maybe one of the most often talked about ones, which is the way he put it is, quote, set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world.
Is that the quote?
Yeah.
Perfect is in there? He puts the word perfect in there?
Yeah.
That's nutty to me. I don't understand why he would postulate that. Why he would throw that out with the word perfect in there. It doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, unless he's a staunch defender of the status quo, which is what you're about to say.
Exactly, because nobody's house is ever in perfect order. Perfect order doesn't exist, right?
No,
I mean,
it doesn't.
So this is just, there's people out here who consider the earth their house, right? They're like, they sit on the top floors of the biggest buildings in your city, and and it's like, if the rest of us are waiting until our houses are in perfect order before we criticize what's going on out here, then nothing changes. It's like it is a rule almost perfectly designed, if you take it seriously, to maintain the status quo.
That's right. Yeah. I've seen him articulate something like that in slightly different ways, and something like, the clean your room kind of thing. And he gets derided for that, and he should, for exactly what you're saying. Like it's a way of beating people into submission, away from organizing, away from thinking about big problems and acting on big problems. And I think that's harmful. But I think the nugget here, sometimes when he does it better, I think he's asking for some humility in terms of understanding the complexity of the problems and sort of starting where you are, and tackling problems in a way that sort of builds confidence and builds competency to tackle larger problems. And if it's best articulated, you can come away with something like that. But if he says something like perfect your own house before, that's trash, and that's something to discard.
And it also speaks to what I think is, in general, his most positive message, which I first got, or like the person who crystallized it for me, was Viktor Frankl, who we talked about in the first ever episode of Where Is Now. The idea, the importance of taking on personal responsibility as a way to find meaning, as a way to find, your to root yourself in the world. And, I think especially in this, modern consumer culture, we need this reminder, numerous times that we won't, just pleasure alone won't fulfill us, and consuming alone won't fulfill us, and all this stuff, and sex alone won't fulfill us, or whatever these things are that are being sold to us. And I don't think people should be labeled. If Peterson is the voice that brings that to somebody, or whether for the first time or as a reminder because they didn't have religion in their life, or or their parents didn't teach them, or they've been living outside of home for 18 years or 40 years or whatever it might be, and they just needed the reminder. If it happens to come from Peterson, I don't think people should be labeled with some of the other things that Peterson says as a result of getting that message from Peterson. And yeah, I think that's just like an overall thing I would take away from this, because he does say it very well.
That's what I'm saying.